Welcome to episode 17 of the Jedi Temple Archives podcast.
There is more knowledge here than anywhere else in the galaxy. Only members of the Jedi Council are allowed access. Guarding the holocrons is one of the most important duties a Jedi can be given. Do you think you're up to the task?
Star Wars fans, and welcome to another episode of the Jedi Temple Archives podcast. I'm Rob, your host, and we're recording this episode on Monday, July 8th, 2019. This week, we're going to be doing a special segment on the show, our top 5 iconic Star Wars moments. And to help me along with that particular topic, I've got Tom and Michelle from the Hyperion Adventures podcast joining me this week. Tom, Michelle, thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you. We appreciate the offer to have us join in.
Always great to join you on the Jedi Temple Archives podcast, Rob.
Yeah, it's always great to have you guys. And just for our listeners out there, I want to let you know I'm fighting a little throat thing. So if I sound a little bit off this week, I apologize, but there's not much I can do about it. And we were so excited about this topic that we just wanted to kind of press on despite that. So without further ado, we will go ahead and launch right into our main topic. Just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea on the layout, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go backwards from our 5th most iconic moment up to our 1st, and we'll just kind of rotate it between the 3 of us. And once we are done, I did open this up to comment out on social media, and we did get some emails and other responses. So we will go through those and kind of talk a little bit about what other scenes people sent in and some of their reasoning behind that. I think really the most difficult thing about doing a show like this is trying to winnow it down to just 5 scenes.
No question about that. There's going to be a lot left on the cutting room floor for sure.
Yeah, I considered cheating at one point and putting in an entire sequence, and I decided that was a little too over the line.
We do it on our podcast all the time, Rob. Feel free to copy our style.
The reality of it is there were these crushing feelings of guilt when I saw some of the stuff other people had sent, and I didn't want to take up too many of their great submissions ahead of time. So we will just go ahead and fire this off, and I think it would be appropriate to have ladies go first. And Michelle, if you want to lead us off with your number 5.
Oh, wow. Thank you. And I think you are correct on whittling it down to 5 was a task. And then also equally difficult was trying to rank them. And Tom twisted my arm and made sure I didn't cheat like we do sometimes. So I really stuck to the 5. So my number 5 is at the moment when Luke removes his father's mask.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one.
Thank you. It's kind of like to have that connection.
Reveals from Darth Vader to Anakin back to Anakin Skywalker, yes.
Doing his best impression of what looked to me as a child like Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah, that's
off the wall.
That's so true.
Clearly the man needs a membership to a tanning salon.
Exactly. So. But yeah, like I said, that one was tough. You know, at times I had that higher up in the list, but then I thought of other things and just said, but that seemed very iconic that, you know, it was at the time in the final trilogy and the real connection with his father.
Yeah, and it's that moment where you actually get to see the humanity kind of returning to Anakin Skywalker, basically coming back into the light a little bit, and Luke actually being successful in his mission to redeem his father.
Yeah, it's the redemption story fulfilled.
Right.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Tom, do you want to go ahead and go next?
Right. So as you mentioned, Rob, there were so many of these that it was really tough to go through them and figure out what I was going to use. So I decided that how I'm going to judge this was I'm going to go with some of the iconic moments that made me feel a certain way when I saw them for the first time in the theater, because I've seen all these films in the theater. And so I'm kind of going to rank them by that way. And not that any of these moments, there could be so many moments that I could put on here. There's so many great iconic Star Wars moments, but I'm going to start with my number 5, and it's going to be from one of the more recent Star Wars films. And that's when, near the end of The Force Awakens, when Kylo Ren is, there and he's reaching for Luke's lightsaber that has kind of fallen in the snow. He's reaching it, trying to force grab it, and it whizzes by his head and lands in Rey's hand, and then she ignites it. And apparently this is on Michelle's list because after so many years of Star Wars being gone and, it coming back into the theater, and that moment, the elation of it all, the excitement of it, the way the theater reacted to it. We were there for a late night, first night screening of it. It just brought so much to me back into that excitement that I get at a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, and I don't think there was anyone in the theater that didn't get goosebumps when that happened.
Right, absolutely.
So apparently I stole one from Michelle here. So.
And Michelle, if you have a backup available, you are more than welcome to use it. I'm not going to cut you out like that.
I may
All right,
do
all
that.
right. So we can still bend the rules a little. I want you to be in your comfort zone.
Oh, thanks. That is a good one, though, obviously, because it made my list.
Where would it have been on your list? Just curious.
Third.
Okay.
I had it way up there,
Right.
and like you said, with the feelings that you get, but, just kind of seeing the transition to Rey of this and the fact that she didn't want to touch that lightsaber again.
Right.
And yet.
But that it kind of willed its way to her almost. Yeah.
What do you think?
I love that pick. So for me, my number 5 actually was from, again, as Tom had done, a newer film. This one is actually from Rogue One, and it's the moment when, Jyn has made her impassioned plea for the Rebel Alliance to mobilize and go to Scarif and try to get the Death Star plans. And even within the Rebel Alliance, there's a lot of politics at play, and they basically determine that it's too big a risk, and they don't want to push their luck with the Empire having a weapon like the Death Star. And so she kind of goes back and meets up with Chirrut and Baze and is fairly dejected, thinking that, she's just not going to be able to pull it off. And Baze points behind her, and she turns around, and you've got Cassian Andor and his group of rebel assassins and saboteurs. And Cassian gives that awesome speech where he's talking about the fact that all of them have done terrible things in service to the rebellion and for the quote unquote greater good, and that it would be unthinkable for them to feel like it was all for nothing. So within so much of Star Wars, you've got the Jedi, and they have these incredible powers that they can fall back on. And that particular film, with it being just your regular foot soldiers and people who knew that there was a likelihood they weren't coming home from that mission, and they still were willing to kind of lay it down and take that risk because they knew that without that, the rebellion was going to get snuffed out. So that was definitely a huge moment in that film for me.
Yeah, great scene and a huge scene. And you should have seen Michelle's face as you were reading that off, because apparently we've already stolen two of her picks. But
I'm prepared for all eventualities.
No, that was that scene really. How many do we need? And it was just so good, and them all standing up there and ready to do this, ready to knowing they're possibly sacrificing themselves for what they believed in. It was an incredible moment for sure.
Terrific. I think we'll go ahead with that, and we'll circle back to Michelle for her number 4.
All right. So my number 4 is when Senator Amidala was asking Anakin, do you think we're on the wrong side? Starting to question where they were putting their loyalties, and was it deviating from what they originally thought were what they were trying to accomplish?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And that's a kind of a small scene that shows a lot. And if you've watched the Clone Wars, there's more doubt being spread throughout the Clone Wars about which side they should be fighting on here. Really, there's no true winner, because both sides were pitted by Darth Sidious against one another. But, that was an interesting viewpoint for someone who is part of the Republic at that point, a senator, realizing that maybe we're not exactly on the good side here.
Right.
Yeah, and clearly she wasn't Force sensitive per se, but she still had those, that intuition that served her so well as both the Queen of Naboo and as a senator. And she could sense that something was off with what was going on with the Republic. So, it's not surprising that she had that revelation. But like Tom said, I mean, there really was no winning side for either of those sides within that conflict.
Right.
Yeah, and like I said, if you've watched the Clone Wars series, there is a few episodes where she is actually meeting with the Separatists, and they're explaining to her why they believe that this side is the right side, and so I think she kind of gets that viewpoint. Although, this is obviously in the film version that has nothing particularly to do with the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars came after this film actually came out. I believe, if I'm not mistaken on that. But it's interesting that viewpoint came across in both aspects of it.
Right.
Well, and it's an interesting kind of commentary on how politics works in general, where it's so much about the two sides polarizing and focusing on what's different between them as opposed to what common ground they may have. So the reality of it is most of us have a lot more in common than we have that diametrically opposite. So
that's a good point.
Everything is true from a certain point of view.
All right, Tom, what's your number 4?
My number 4, again, I'm going back to scenes that made me feel a certain way when I first saw them in the theater, when I saw a Star Wars film in the theater. And I'm going to go right back to the original film, Star Wars, when I first saw it in the theater, the very opening scene after the scroll. When you're there, it pans down and you see this planet, and then the Tantive 4. You didn't know the name of the ship at that time, but you see this little spaceship that looks pretty cool go across, and then suddenly this giant Imperial Star Destroyer comes across, and you're just sitting there, and you knew right from the first few minutes of this film that you're seeing something that you've never seen before, something completely different. It was 8-year-old me going, my jaw hitting the floor, going, wow, what am I about to witness here for the next couple hours? And that was definitely an iconic moment for me.
And that Star Destroyer is actually still flying across the screen as we sit.
You know, you ever watch Spaceballs? They make fun of it where it goes on forever.
Interesting little tidbit about that. The model that they used of that Star Destroyer, they never even finished the top right-hand portion of it.
Oh my God!
Because it never makes it in a shot.
Right.
So
wow,
they only did enough of the model for the parts of that particular Star Destroyer that were going to be on scene.
Wow. Isn't that like a frustration, like if you have Legos and you don't finish the entire...
Oh, I think there's an entire Big Bang Theory episode about things not being completed, but it would drive me absolutely crazy.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
So at some point you're going back and breaking into the props room and finishing that off.
Say, Mr. Lucas, can I please finish that at home on my own time?
I can't sleep. I can't eat.
Sorry.
No. We're here to have a good time. So, and for me, actually, my number 4 was also involving some crazy starships, and that was really the Rebel fleet arriving at Scarif again from Rogue One. The fact that my first 2 favorite iconic moments from Star Wars being from Rogue One. I do love that film, but not only the fact that the way that was shot was so much in the vein of the original Star Wars, and it was kind of a space battle that was Star Wars on steroids from everything that we'd seen previously. But I loved the little touches they put in there with the Ghost appearing on scene for people who are fans of Star Wars Rebels. And when they have the X-Wings kind of flying through the superstructure of the shield gate there, and then they split off and you've got the ground battle and the space battle kind of going on at the same time. That whole sequence was just, it gives me chills even now when I rewatch that film.
Right.
This was the one that I was originally going to cheat on and kind of take that all the way to the end of the film, but I had to control myself a little bit. So I can't steal everything.
I also love the little voice bits that they extracted from the original Death Star attack from New Hope that they used to kind of, make
Red leaders.
Right,
appearance.
exactly. So that they had so many of it felt like this was right before A New Hope.
Sure.
Yeah, and actually you got to find out, how Red 5 opened up for Luke. So
exactly.
Stay with your wingman.
Yeah.
All right, so that should bring us back to Michelle and your number 3, if you have any left that haven't been taken.
I've been scrambling here. No, I had a few extras, So similar to kind of what Tom was talking about, this one was also kind of one of those scenes in the movie when you saw it on screen that evoked emotion, and that was Luke staring at the binary sunsets. You know.
Oh, now it's my turn. To have my
Payback.
Turnabout is fair play.
I know. And actually, it was hard putting that one as 3. I kind of wanted that higher up, but I think only just because, yes, it was a moving scene and something very unique at that time too, but that in and of itself, I thought didn't promote something. It just, other than evoking what was the emotions of what was going on and what he was dealing with.
You know, the interesting thing about that scene, and it just actually struck me just a second ago, is that we've watched many things on musicals, and we've watched on Disney musicals, and there's always they've talked about there's always a song, like the third song in or the fourth song in, where the hero or heroine is there and they sing a song about what they want, and that was pretty much without actually any lyrics going on there.
That's true.
Luke staring off, doing that "I Want" song with John Williams Orchestra swelling in the background.
That's a good point.
Just in that moment, in the very early moments of the film.
Right. That's a good point.
Well, yeah, and the other interesting thing about that particular scene is, for people that have really kind of gotten to the deep underpinnings of Star Wars, it really is based on Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And the very first part of that is yearning for adventure. And that scene really encompassed, with, as Tom said, without a word being spoken, you could just see that Luke's mind and his heart were out there.
Right.
Elsewhere in the galaxy, he wanted to go off. He wanted to have adventure. He wanted to do all these things that he felt like he was being held back from. And so from the standpoint of kind of fulfilling that particular model of the hero's journey, that really was the launching point for his entire adventure.
Yeah, right. No question about it. Just, I actually should have been on my list, because talk about iconic scenes. There's very few better than that one.
And that music just rips, pulls at every heartstring.
Right.
That mournful, that's a great thing. I mean, John Williams and the amazing music he has that has been part of all these Star Wars films. But, you can have the same theme that gets restated in multiple different ways to evoke different emotions even, and that's something that he's really mastered.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Where did you have that on your list?
Number 3.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Samesies.
Samesies. My number 3, I'm going to go completely the other way, and I'm going to go into Anakin and Obi-Wan's lightsaber duel on Mustafar, because the weight of that one, I still consider it the best lightsaber duel. I mean, yes, of course, the Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan one is a great lightsaber duel. But as far as the weight upon it, the emotion that's involved in it, it still is, to me, the best lightsaber duel that we've seen within the Star Wars films. But like I said, there was just so much emotion going on. The fact that they're literally in hell when this is happening, they're fighting, and it's these two brothers, friends, master and apprentice going at it, and it weighs on you. It's so heavy. Still to this day, every time we watch it, we rewatched it just a couple months ago when we were doing our Star Wars Remembered series, and I just felt it on my shoulders as I was watching that part of the film, and so that's why I included it on this list, and exactly why I included it at number 3 on this list.
Yep, that is a great selection. And interestingly enough, you think about the end of that battle with Obi-Wan telling Anakin, "Don't try it." And then when Anakin actually did make the attempt, he removes both his legs and his one good arm. But it got mentioned to me, it was probably like a month and a half back, that was essentially the same move that Obi-Wan had used on Darth Maul at the end of The Phantom Menace. And so he was keenly aware of exactly how that was executed and how to defend against it. And that was something that I'd really never thought about before.
Yeah. I remember you bringing that up on our episode when we talked about that. And that was a very interesting point that you brought up. Of course, you always bring up opposite. Great points. So not a surprise there.
Right.
Couldn't tell you my bank account or my phone number, but I've got all this useless Star Wars trivia.
Priorities, my friend. Priorities.
Exactly.
We need to have like on a cruise ship where they do a Star Wars trivia day.
The Star Wars Day at Sea, they do a Star Wars trivia at night.
All right, let's do this thing.
And they do it in a cantina. Well, bar, but cantina, yes. So I think we're all over that.
Awesome. All right. So I that actually all gave me just enough time to fit in a new number 3.
Nice.
So it was completely a stalling tactic. But my number 3 was originally, as I mentioned, going to be Luke staring off at the binary sunset. But the other one that kind of jumped to mind was when Emperor Palpatine arrives at the Death Star 2 in Return of the Jedi. And primarily because, up until that point, you've seen him in hologram form and you've kind of heard him talking to Vader. But Vader has been this character that has been firmly established as being, a terror to all the members of the Imperial military, and they hold him in such awe and fear. And the Emperor comes down the ramp of that shuttle, and there's Vader on his knees with all the "My Master,"
Right.
and it just goes to show you that, this old, withered, deformed man who you're seeing clearly has got the upper hand on a person as fearsome as Darth Vader. So that was incredibly impactful and actually one of my favorite scenes from Return of the Jedi.
I totally understand that.
Right,
The other interesting thing about that scene is compared to a scene that's earlier, because they welcomed Darth Vader in earlier, and they basically have like a small regiment down there to meet him, just a small group of soldiers to stand to welcome him there. When the Emperor comes in, like the entire ship is there to meet him. They have ships flying around, to celebrate him being there. The difference in welcoming, and that's another thing that showed you how different their status was within the Empire, of course.
And just the demeanor of the military officer who was giving the report to Vader about the fact that they were running behind on the schedule for the Death Star. And Vader tells him, well, you can explain that to the Emperor when he arrives. And the Emperor's coming here. Oh, we'll redouble our efforts.
Yeah.
You just see him stretch out his collar.
Free throat hugs.
Yeah. Now
All right.
that is a good one. All right.
It is. All right, terrific. Michelle, what do you got for number 2?
So number 2, coming from episode 6, when Jedi Luke is on the platform or on the plank there, and he does his little salute and then jumps off and then springs back into battle. And it, kind of like, again, he's taking charge. He is not fearing things that in the past maybe he was shying from. He just is going all in, and he had a marvelous plan, and it and even though there were some twists and turns to some of it, it was still pretty iconic.
Right. And it's one thing with Luke is that he battled so many insecurities for so long. He would put out this brashness, this young cockiness at times, but he was very insecure in many regards, but he was very secure at that moment that what he was going to pull off there was going to work.
Yeah, and he had, his plan had layers within layers. I mean, they sent in Lando kind of undercover.
Right.
Then they send in the droids. Then they send in Leia disguised as Bausch.
Yep.
So, I mean, they had all these contingencies in place depending on if any particular strategy was going to be successful or fail. And even when, he gets thrown the twist of being dropped down into the Rancor pit, he handled that without, he was clearly a little bit concerned, but I don't think there was true fear there.
Right.
And, he handled that and just kind of moved on to the next phase of the plan. So he had all kinds of contingencies built in, and it showed his confidence in terms of feeling like he was in control of any given situation.
Right. Exactly. It just showed how much he'd grown over the several episodes that we'd seen him at that point. So definitely. My number 2 is we're going to go to Empire Strikes Back. And my number 2 is not the moment you may think it is. It's actually the moment when Han's about to be frozen in carbonite. And it's, of course, the I love you, I know. And all because, one, it strikes so many emotions all at the same time because this is happening. You can't believe, one, that this is happening to our heroes. You believe that someone's going to save the day at that moment. You don't know who, but you think something's going to happen. But apparently it's not. But it was both that whole part was touching, it was funny, and it was heart-wrenching all at the same. You felt all those emotions right at that time. And, Chewie being very emotional about his best friend, and C-3PO not being able to see because he's on Chewie's back. And, it's a crazy moment, and I just feel it really deserves to be one of the most iconic of all time.
It definitely defines, Han Solo's character. The
Right.
fact that he's looking into the face of what could be death, and his last comment is his cocky little, I know,
Right.
which I believe was not in the actual
No,
script.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, he had lived that, at least
Yep,
in one of
and
the
again-
takes, and they kept it. Yeah.
Yep. Again, it's one of those things that they took scripts that George had written that would have been difficult for anyone to deliver with any kind of conviction, and they managed to deliver the lines and make them believable. But then they also kind of threw in that little piece of themselves that really made those characters the ones that we know and love.
And now every other couple that you see at Disneyland is wearing, Disney
Just every
Park
other?
is wearing that shirt that says "I love you," and I know. Yeah.
Yep.
That is true.
Absolutely. I'm glad that someone in Disney marketing figured that out.
Well, those are I really will take those over those most expensive day ever shirts, which drive me crazy every time
Exactly.
I see them.
Yeah. I'm just here to pay.
So, yeah. Those drive me crazy every time I see them. So, yeah, I'll take those any day. But yes, good for Disney to. Well, Disney figured out marketing. That's surprising.
Yeah, go figure. Michelle, do you have anything you wanted to throw in on that one?
No, I think I agree that it was a real compilation of a lot of emotions. I think having seen Solo again and thinking back at that, and again the friendship of Chewie and Han, that you could really. I think if I were to watch it again right now, I'd probably cry. I think it would bring a lot more. I mean, not that we never believed that they were close friends. We've seen them everywhere, but just again, kind of knowing more the history behind how it all started and how it evolved. I think that would probably be almost as emotional as the fact that he and Leia were being separated.
All the more reason for hashtag Make Solo 2 happen.
That's right.
Which we do totally support.
We do.
All right. I'm shocked that I've only had one thing that has shown up on someone else's list so far.
Yeah.
We'll see if I jinxed myself there. So my number 2 was also from Empire Strikes Back, and this was actually Yoda lifting Luke's X-wing out of the swamp on Dagobah. So for me, that was super impactful and truly an iconic scene, because that is really the first time that we get to see a Jedi's true powers and the degree to which they can manipulate things through the Force, as well as the fact that, there's that great exchange between Luke and Yoda after Yoda has finished lifting it out of the swamp, and actually even leading into it when Yoda is basically telling him, try not, do, or do not, there is no try. And then after he's actually removed the X-Wing from the swamp and Luke's just standing there in disbelief, and he goes, I don't believe it.
Right.
And Yoda says, that is why you failed.
Right.
So it really goes to show you where Luke's mind is at the beginning of that particular scene. And then, that kind of is what brings it full circle when you get into Return of the Jedi and you see to what degree he has kind of come to terms with his powers and the things that he can do. So that was just a great scene, and it was a great insight into why Yoda had actually been the Jedi Grand Master, and the degree to which he was truly in tune with the Force. And, as he says, luminous beings are we.
Right.
Yeah, it's also interesting because the first time we ever even see that the Jedi can even manipulate, force grab anything is earlier when Luke is hanging in the Wampa Cave. We'd not seen anybody try to draw anything towards them until he's trying to get the light. And he saw how much he was, obviously he's not trained in the Force, but he was struggling to try and get the lightsaber to come to him. He eventually does, gets him out. And of course, he does the Jedi way and chomps the Wampa's arm off. Shocking. So do you see a fully trained Jedi to be able to do as much as lift an entire starship?
Right.
It was incredible at that point. And yes.
Yeah, the other thing that bears mentioning about that scene in the Wampa Cave is that, it's been one of the downsides to the fact that now everything is in such ultra high def. And when you get these movies occasionally back in the theaters, you can actually see the China stamp on the face of his saber.
Oh, how funny.
So there are some things that, they didn't kind of clean up when they had done the more recent, high def cuts of the movie. And
I swore there was a Jedi temple on China. Yeah, the Outer Rim planet. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's China. It's China, actually.
Known to some as Octo. It's a new province.
Yeah.
All right, Michelle, are you ready to throw your number one out there?
I am. And okay, so I guess moderate cheating in the sense that
Shocker.
I know. But I think I'll try to pick one, but it's more of a statement. And I felt like so much surrounded this statement, and it comes from Rogue One. And I'll go with Jyn Erso's saying rebellions are built on hope. Although I know that sentence was used more than once in that film.
Yeah.
So, but I think that kind of just the whole thing is all about rebellions and hope and change for better, and it's great that they captured
And then
that.
Leia later says, when she gets the plans,
Right.
This provide, she says it's hope.
Right.
The next film is A New Hope.
Right.
It's all about hope. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, that really has been kind of the theme of the more recent films. I know that was a major theme within The Last Jedi as well.
On to my number one, and it's everything that it was 8-year-old me watching them fly down the trench at the Death Star in Episode 4, and the drama of it all, the tension of it all.
Right.
They had just blown up R2-D2 and he's bearing down on Luke, even though the Force was strong with this one. And then suddenly Han Solo flies in and, first you just see a blast and you're like, what the heck happened? And then there's Han singing or shouting Yahoo! And you're all clear, kid. And then Luke closes his eyes, lets it go.
Yeah.
The Death Star explodes, and so did the theater, because everybody absolutely lost it. We had just experienced something we had never seen before. Not to this day. I've seen many movies that have had big emotional, even just to recently Avengers Endgame, when the Avengers Assemble happens. Big emotional moments within theaters, but nothing will ever match that feeling of the first time seeing that sequence play out in the original Star Wars, and now of course A New Hope, Episode 4.
Terrific. Yeah. So for me, for my number one scene, and this has kind of been one of my favorite scenes of all time. Nothing has really risen as a planet in my mind, but when Luke and Vader finally confront each other down in the carbon freeze chamber, kind of in the bowels of Bespin. And Luke ignites his saber and Vader ignites his, and they cross sabers for the first time. It's just one of those moments where it's the culmination of everything that's been leading up to that point, and you're about to find out if Luke's training has been enough to allow him to defeat Vader. And I mean, that says nothing of the fact that the end of that fight is an iconic moment all on its own. But
which I'm actually surprised it wasn't on any of our lists.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because it did. Obviously, we've gotten a number of lists that got sent in by others that we will jump to next. But it certainly makes some lists. But I think that in some cases, maybe we were kind of defending against having to do a quick swap replace, but
I think maybe it was so obvious. I don't know.
Yeah.
It also goes to show you that, I mean, as we said at the top of the show, there are so many iconic moments in Star Wars, and different ones speak to different people in different ways. So it's very personal. There's certain things I think we can all agree on, and then there's other things where I'm going to have a list here from Kim, who put together her own list and submitted it to me, which was very kind of her. And Kim is my wife, for those of you who don't know.
Nice.
But she had some really insightful selections on her list, and certainly things that I think when I read them off, it's going to be like, oh yeah, I could totally see that. But and some of the lists that we got, had moments from outside of the actual films themselves, and I didn't really restrict it to films only. The only reason I did it for the purposes of my list was just because if I start wandering off into Rebels and the Clone Wars, 5 is never going to be even a number that I can close to.
Exactly. Plus, you might make somebody feel like they're a jerk.
Exactly. That we are going to steer clear of that at all costs. So.
And we know that this is the podcast where it doesn't make you feel like a jerk.
And I have Michelle, you don't understand. That is a great slogan. So I'm gonna have to start putting that in all my marketing. I made it on my Facebook description today.
Oh, that's too funny. Oh my gosh.
We're gonna be immortalized.
Well, on another note, that number one pick though was really, really amazing. And if you think back, the very first time you saw that film, you really didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, it was a mystery. I mean, I think we've gotten kind of dulled by watching these films over and over. But the very first time you saw that battle about to begin, you didn't have any clue what was going to end up happening, and it did take twists, and that's what's great about these films.
Well, and also, I mean, just going back to that point, and yes, we want to get to Kim's list here in a second, but the fact that Vader was so, had no doubt that he was going to win this, that he was battling with one hand for, at least to begin with, until he realized that, Luke was putting up a little bit of a battle there, even impressive, and finally he realized he had to pull out a few more stops to stop Luke there.
And the other thing about it is that when I first watched that, knowing there was going to be another film in the trilogy, and your assumption was that neither of them were necessarily going to be killed, but you figured there was certainly a better than average chance that someone was going to be pretty severely injured. And to have Luke actually get injured and then to have that psychological wound inflicted on top of that as Vader makes his reveal, it put Luke in that position where he had two options at that point. He could turn to the dark side, join Vader, or do what he did, which was to just let go of that catwalk and kind of fall into the bowels of Cloud City. And knowing full well that could be the end of him. And so it was incredibly heavy.
Right. And again, the end of that film was another one of those where, it's kind of like Avengers Infinity War. Like the good guys didn't necessarily win that one. They survived, not so much Infinity War, but in that one they survived, but you didn't feel good about their place really and what was going on. They tried to make it as positive as possible, but you could tell it's like, ooh, we took a big hit during this one. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was listening to a Clashing Sabers podcast, and I've got a list from Brandon, who is one of the hosts of that particular podcast that I'll be bringing up here in just a few minutes. But they had just done a review of Empire Strikes Back. And one of the things that they were talking about there was really how that embodied that entire scene, but also that the cliffhanger that they left that film on with the good guys not winning and ending on that kind of high was very risky at that particular time. It wasn't something that they did in film. And it was really a massive risk, especially when you consider that George Lucas had all of his profits from the initial Star Wars film that had been turned around and sunk back into Empire Strikes Back, which again went over budget. This was not him gambling with house money. This was him gambling with his personal fortune that he had made in that first movie. So it was an incredible risk on so many levels, and one that I think has paid off. I mean, this is certainly in the top 2 or 3, if not the top pick for most people's favorite Star Wars film.
And it did in the long run, but there were a lot of people to begin with that are like, what did we just witness here? They weren't really happy with how this all turned out and what was being left there, to begin with. I mean, it all developed eventually, and it obviously there was great critical acclaim to it, but there were some fans out there that weren't thrilled with how The Empire Strikes Back finished out and where they put all their favorite characters at that point. Again, you get to Return of the Jedi and it fills in the gaps. It makes up the difference in it. It's more of a feel good, and it makes that be more of the crux of the story. But at the moment when they first walked out of the theater, there were a lot of people that are like, what did I just see?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, that just goes back to the fact that that's not what they did in movies at that time. It was all about, that third act ending on a big high and, folks walking out of the theater smiling and laughing and feeling like they'd won a victory. And in this case, it was very much not that case.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Terrific.
So let's get to Kim's list. I want to hear Kim's list.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So we've got a list here from my wife, Kim, and her number 5 pick was Ben and his Obi-Wan Kenobi and his last words to Luke on the Death Star, kind of as he was leaving to deactivate the tractor beam, and Obi-Wan basically saying, I'm gonna go off and do this on my own, and Luke wanted to go with him, and he told him, no, your destiny lies down a different path than mine, and if you don't stay here and carry on, then other systems will suffer the same fate as Alderaan. So that was kind of, that it epitomized the fact that Obi-Wan, and even at that point, we didn't truly know his full backstory with the Republic and the fledgling rebellion. but he was willing at that point to risk his life to go on this mission and free Luke to be able to go on walking his path.
Right.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. And Obi-Wan, if you've watched some of the Clone Wars, if you've watched Rebels, he knew that maybe it wasn't Anakin that was the chosen one. Maybe it was Luke. And I don't know if either are really true, but there was that speculation out there that maybe Luke was the one.
Yep. And again, I think there's a lot of debate about who the chosen one actually could be. There's certainly an argument to be made for Anakin actually being the chosen one, but as Yoda said, a prophecy misunderstood.
Right.
It could be where it was really ultimately Anakin did bring balance to the Force. He got the Jedi numbers down there to the level where they were pretty much even-handed with the Sith. So.
Exactly true.
All right, so her number 4 pick was Jyn Erso and her defiant statements to Director Krennic, kind of at the top of the Scarif Tower. Where she's basically making her little speech to him about how my father put a fuse in the center of your machine and I'm just told the entire galaxy how to light it. So again, it's that recurring theme of, this character who is basically willing to die for their beliefs and to bring hope to the galaxy by giving them a way to defeat this battle station that the Empire has constructed that's capable of destroying planets.
Right. Well, and somebody who the seeds were planted in her since a child about how to fight for what's right. And she didn't seem to follow through on that based on things that were happening to her. And then, full circle, she's realizing, yes, I have to be a part of this fight, and she couldn't resist anymore, kind of like the fiber of what she was or what the basis of her was.
Absolutely. All right, so Kim's number 3 was actually the scene in Empire Strikes Back where, Luke and Han are missing. No one knows where they're at. And the temperature is dropping rapidly. And the base commander is basically talking to Leia about how, we need to close the shield doors. And it was just really a situation that epitomized who Leia was, that despite the fact that these two men who she was confused to some degree about her feelings about, but she clearly felt very strongly about both of them. And she was going to do what was right for the Rebel Alliance. And it was more important than any one or two people. So the strength of character that she had in ordering those shield doors to be closed at Echo Base there just really spoke volumes to who she was as a person and her commitment to the rebellion. And we end up seeing a lot of that same type of commitment to the Resistance in Force Awakens, and again in New Hope. So she is always going to do what's right for the movement over any individual person.
No, that's true. I mean, and even in the future, this is not me coming up with this, but just in watching, a lot of the extras that came out of episode 7 is that part of Ben's issues was that because she was so involved in the politics of everything and doing what she felt was right for the rebellion, that she really sometimes missed the mark of being the mom.
Yeah, for sure. Tom, any thoughts on that one?
I completely agree with the sentiment on all sides of that. She always did. That's why I think she's one of the, if not the greatest hero actually in Star Wars, definitely one of the top 2 or 3, is because of the fact that she committed her life to being there to save the universe, to being there to, even at the fault of, like you said, Michelle, her son, her family, whatever, she was there committed to make sure the right thing was done as often. And the other part of that scene, that is when they do close the doors, Chewbacca's mournful howl, afraid that he's never going to see his best friend again, and arguably Luke as well. It was really a tough moment.
Yeah, agreed. So what you're saying is she is the shield that guards the realms of men?
There you
Sorry,
go.
That's
nailed
wrong. Wrong show. Sorry.
Different genres, but it all works.
All right. So Kim's number 2 was, and this is actually a great one, Luke and Leia swinging across the chasm in the Death Star in A New Hope.
Right.
And that was it was just kind of a cool scene, all told. The two of them are out there. The catwalk controls have just been destroyed by Luke as he closed the shield door there, or the blast door. And the other thing about this scene is it was really kind of a call back to the genre that Lucas was drawing from when he made Star Wars in the first place. Those swashbuckling adventures.
I was about to say exactly the same thing.
Yep. So it was just very much, an homage to some of the earlier, the Errol Flynn films and things that inspired his childhood. And it was just one of those scenes that when you think Star Wars, it's hard not to think about that.
Yeah,
exactly.
It was in all the trailers leading into that film when it first came out, and so you were expecting it, but at the same time, it was important when it happened. Yeah, definitely one of those scenes you remember always.
Exactly.
Yeah, and amazingly, I think they did that in one take.
Wow.
Wow.
Yep.
That is impressive.
Which I can only imagine that's probably all they wanted to do, but
yeah.
Can't do our show in one take, so I don't know how you can do that, accomplish that.
Yeah, tell me about it. Hashtag post-production.
Yes.
Right.
Hashtag editing skills.
Oh, no kidding. And I am envious of yours, Tom. All right. So Kim's number one was Luke and Ben meeting up with Han and Chewbacca in the cantina on Tatooine there in A New Hope. And for her, that was, again, the cantina scene in general is just an amazing scene. It's one of the earliest statements in the film where you just realize you are not in Kansas anymore.
Right.
And you've got all these incredible aliens and everything around. But that whole interplay between Han and Ben kind of negotiating passage and Luke flipping out about the cost. I'm going to buy my own ship for that. And also the fact that this was kind of the introduction to what became one of the only ships you'd ever think of that's actually a character in its own right, which is their first experience with the Millennium Falcon. So
Yeah.
And by the way, Michelle will, to this day, like if we go up to bed and she wants to put A New Hope on as we drift off to sleep, she will fast forward to the cantina scene. She will never skip the cantina scene. So, or if for some reason we're watching it and she's missed it, she's going to back that thing up because she wants to see the cantina scene.
It's the best.
It's no coincidence, I think, that one of the places that they will do reservations for within Galaxy's Edge prior to you even getting into the parks is that you can get that reservation for Oga's Cantina, and you don't see quite as many aliens within the Disney parks.
I know. Have you seen some of the people in Disney parks?
Yeah. Well, I was trying to be polite. Excuse me, ma'am, sir. No costume.
Yeah. By the way, when you were in Oga's Cantina, and I guess this is a little bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to know, just give it. There is a point when that song, the main song, the cantina song, breaks out, and everybody erupts in the cantina because it's there's something that leads up to it, and then it happens, and it's great.
You just got to hope that your 45-minute stint is at the right spot
exactly.
in the 3-hour loop. Right.
We went there twice, and we were lucky the second time to be able to witness it. Yeah. So
that's very, very cool. Awesome. So that pretty much does it for my wife's selections, but we were very fortunate. We got some great submissions from some of our listeners. And I'm going to start off with Brandon, who sent in his list. Brandon, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the hosts of the Clashing Sabers podcast. Definitely go out and check them out. They can be found at clashingsabers.net and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Clashing Sabers. And Brandon's number 5 was Luke walking through the fire to confront the First Order in The Last Jedi. So that, again, was a goosebump scene for sure. Still to this day, when I watch that scene, it drives me crazy that I didn't pick up on all the hints that were there. And I'm not going to go into what I'm specifically talking about for anyone who hasn't seen the film, but it's very M. Night Shyamalan, like in the sense that, when you watch the movie again, you're picking up all these little clues as to what was coming.
It's obvious after you watch it again, but the first time you see it, you're like, what? Why does it look like that? What's going on?
Yeah.
All right. So, so that's definitely a great scene.
Yeah, that is.
Number 4, Brandon's pick was Leia's message to Obi-Wan, the help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope, within Ben Kenobi's little hut there on Tatooine, which, again, is just, it got brought back in The Last Jedi by R2 when he was basically trying to guilt Luke into getting back in the fight, which I thought was a great nod to that particular moment. But, that was just a great scene, and that hologram was incredible. Yeah,
for the time.
Being able to see something like that in a theater in 1977, you had no frame of reference for that, and it was done so well that was that's the great thing about Star Wars in general. You really felt like you were dealing with people who had this advanced technology. It all seemed so everyday and commonplace to them. So
and the impassioned speech that she makes within that, it's not just yes, you know the classic line, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope," but the whole speech is very impassioned, and it's really important to what is going on and lays out the detail work of what's to come.
Absolutely. So again, one of the things I should mention here is the logo for ClashingSabers.net is Ahsoka with her sabers crossed behind her back, parrying Darth Vader's blow from behind. And so obviously they have a deep love of Ahsoka Tano. We've already done one episode on her, and I believe we're going to have Brandon, or try to get Brandon on with us when we go back and do our part 2 of our Ahsoka series, where we cover kind of the post-Clone Wars Ahsoka. So keep an eye open for that. But the next couple that he sent in are both related to Ahsoka Tano. So number 3 was Ahsoka walking away from the Jedi Order.
That nearly made my list.
Yeah.
Yep, and I totally agree. Like I said, I kind of had to draw the line and not get into Clone Wars and Rebels and some of the books or things that are out there that I could have drawn from. But this is a scene from Clone Wars Season 5, and the thing about that is that it really goes to show you the incredible strength that Ahsoka had. I mean, this was the Jedi were the family that she had been raised with since she was a very small child, and it was the only family she knew. And they had taught her everything that defined who she was had come from the Jedi Order. And as Brandon said, it was just an indication of the level of strength that he aspires to someday have, to be able to do something that just takes that strength of will. So that is an amazing episode. Again, Tom and I have said it ad nauseum on this podcast, but if you have not seen the Clone Wars, if you haven't checked out Star Wars Rebels or Star Wars Resistance, definitely consider putting those on your watch list. I know some of them are hard to get right now, but once Disney Plus comes out on November 12th of this year, you should have access to the entire series, and it is completely worth your time watching both of those, or all 3 of those.
And that scene that you're referencing there it's just so heartbreaking. You know, and you could tell it's heartbreaking for all the characters involved. Ahsoka knows she needs to leave, but you can tell that there's part of her that's like, I really shouldn't be doing this, but I need to do this. Meanwhile, Anakin is pleading for her to stay. And, but he also understands what she's doing and knows that, they both haven't seen eye to eye on what the council is doing at that point. And that just the whole... again, it goes with Star Wars again, the musical score behind it and everything. If you haven't watched Clone Wars, and if it doesn't bring a tear to your eye as you're watching this all happen, you need to watch it more in depth, because it is an amazing, amazing scene. And I nearly had it. I had it on my list at one point, and I decided to go a different direction. It's iconic to those who know it, but there's so many people who never experienced the Clone Wars that don't know it. But yeah, you should. Just like you said, Rob, when it comes out in November, go watch the Clone Wars if you're a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, she is, as we mentioned in that Ahsoka episode, definitely go back and listen to it if you have not. But she is really kind of one leg of the Holy Trinity that kind of guides Anakin's life. And as each of those legs kind of gets cut out from under him, that is a big chunk of what leads to his fall. So, but as Tom said, I mean, this is a testament to Ahsoka's perception that there were so many things that were taking place within the Clone Wars that were major warning signs that there were things wrong with the Republic, that there were things wrong with the Jedi Order. And she was one of the very few that actually picked up on those and was able to, in a lot of ways, change her destiny.
Right. Well, and just, again, with what's great about these stories, if you put yourself in their shoes and you question yourself, would I have the strength to make that big of a change in my life for what I believe, and especially, although I think she felt very confident of her skills, I don't know that she always felt confident of herself. And this kind of tested her in so many different levels.
Yeah. And again, that is why I'm very much looking forward to part 2 of our Ahsoka series, because you start to get to see that Ahsoka is at peace with who she is, and the power that comes from that, and the things that she's able to accomplish are just incredible as she kind of comes into her own as not a Jedi, but definitely as a Force wielder for the light.
Exactly.
So, as I mentioned, Brandon had 2 picks related to Ahsoka, and the second one is basically the scene that was turned into the Clashing Sabers logo, which is Ahsoka and Vader facing off within Star Wars Rebels in the episode Twilight of the Apprentice, which is the series 2 or the season 2 finale. And she is engaged in a battle with Vader, trying to buy time for Ezra and the crew of the Ghost, or the members that were in the temple with her, giving them time to escape. And as she's kind of helping them get away, she's got her back to Vader, and he comes at her from behind to attack, and she kind of, has her sabers reversed over her shoulder in the shape of an axe and catches his blade. So it's just, as we mentioned before, there are so many impactful moments within the animated series, and this is certainly one of the major ones, because ultimately the door on the room that they're in slams shut, and you don't really get to see the culmination of that battle until much later in Star Wars Rebels. So there's a huge question at hand about whether Ahsoka has survived her confrontation with Vader, and what she then figures out is her old master, Anakin.
Yeah. So much so, Dave Filoni did a shirt change.
Yeah.
At, I think it was Star Wars Celebration. I'm not sure if it was Star Wars Celebration or Comic-Con, but one of the two, where he did a shirt change because people were questioning on whether Ahsoka was still alive. And you can, if you want, I'm not going to give it away, but you can look that up if you want to.
It's cool.
But that moment, the fact that she thinks she knows who Darth Vader is, but doesn't really know, but then it's confirmed.
Right.
And there's just it's another, it's similar to my moment with Obi-Wan and Anakin. It's very similar in feeling, just in a shorter duration to actually have that happen. And there's a lot of weight in that lightsaber duel.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, again, she makes a statement to him that, then Anakin Skywalker, is not alive anymore. And she says, well, then I will avenge him. And he says, revenge is not the Jedi way. She just turned,
So good.
I am no Jedi. Yeah. So yes, it was a great scene. And again, there were advantages to her leaving the Jedi Order. She was able to more freely act in a way that she found to be in line with what was the right thing to do.
A little more on the gray side of a Jedi,
Oh,
right.
Yeah. I love the whole concept of gray Jedi.
Right,
So.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, and Brandon's number 1 pick was Luke throwing his lightsaber away as opposed to killing Vader in the throne room aboard the Death Star 2. And, his feelings about that particular scene was that it really sums up what Star Wars is all about, that having those moments in your life where you have to make a choice to do the right thing or the wrong thing, and the end's not always justifying the means. And Luke makes that decision to throw away his lightsaber and completely deny turning to the dark side. And there's a whole realm of thing that you can go into with Return of the Jedi and, Luke's dark clothing. And kind of, at the end of Return of the Jedi, as he opens the neck of his black combat suit and you see the white lining, it's very, very reflective of the fact that, a lot of that movie, he's toying with kind of coming perilously close to turning to the dark side or taking a path that might lead him there. And that moment in Palpatine's throne room, with the Emperor goading him on, he has the strength of character once again to just see where he is headed and to pull himself back. And again, his mechanical hand and Vader's mechanical hand kind of are what seemed to snap him out of that. But just a great scene. And again, here we are. We're 4 or 5 lists 5 lists, I guess, down into this review. And some of the scenes that you would have assumed would have been on multiple lists have not even shown up yet.
Right.
But you cannot argue with the selections that people have made.
Absolutely.
There's so many iconic scenes.
Yeah.
That's what made this really difficult to narrow it down. And that's why I had to figure out how I was going to approach it, because you can just go on listing them for days. We could have gone through a top 50. We'd be here forever. But we could have been doing a top 50 and we'd probably still be leaving some on the floor,
Yeah.
All right. So our next list comes from Tony with the Disney Discussions podcast. You can find them at disneydiscussions.com and also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just give a look up to Disney Discussions podcast. But Tony's list, the first selection that he had was number 5 was the Chewie We're Home moment from The Force Awakens with Han and Chewbacca finally tracking down the Millennium Falcon. And even though, at that point, you didn't even realize that it had been that long without that ship being in their possession, it was still, was obviously included in the trailers. But, even knowing it was coming in the film, it still gave me chills.
Yeah, it did. But in the trailer, it wrecked me every time I would watch it, for so many. I remember I was at, for a time, if you would go to Disney California Adventure Park and they had the World of Color, and they would actually play the trailer within the World of Color, and it would wreck me in the middle of World of Color when that scene would come on, because it's still to this day one of the best Star Wars trailers that I've ever made. Yes, of course, in the film it was fantastic, but just at that point, because we were so excited to bring Star Wars back, and that was part of that trailer.
Right.
Yes, iconic, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. His number 4 pick was very much in line with the one that Tom had mentioned as part of his list with the Battle of the Heroes with Anakin and Obi-Wan within Revenge of the Sith. And I imagine for many of the same reasons. I mean, that battle was, first, it was just an amazing lightsaber duel, but obviously you had seen the relationship that these two had, and there was a heavy emotional component to that. And it really just kind of served to highlight the tragedy of what had happened to Anakin.
I mean, just the dialogue between the two of them, that they were really just very vulnerable to each other of what they were going through, and that this was not something that either of them necessarily wanted to do but felt the need to do. And and how it played with the scenery and what was going on there, and everything being very fiery, and it just had all the elements of a perfect scene.
Absolutely. All right, so Tony's number 3 was the battle in Attack of the Clones between Yoda and Count Dooku, which again is another scene that we have not had brought up. But again, you knew that Yoda had an incredible mastery of the Force. He was the Jedi Grand Master. But we had not really had an opportunity to see Yoda in battle before. And again, I mean, Count Dooku with his one-handed style and his very artistic flair with his lightsaber, it was super cool to see the two of them kind of going at it. And it was the type of fight that we'd never really seen before in any Star Wars movie, with Yoda kind of flipping and bouncing around.
I still think my first impression of that was between a cheering that this was happening and a laughing at the style of Yoda flipping all over the place, because I couldn't believe what was going on before my eyes,
Although I do remember in the theater when that happened, I mean, everybody just roared in applause, and it was just amazing to see. And, I guess being vertically challenged, I kind of understand that you have to come up with another way to fight.
Another tactic.
So what you're saying is you were both in awe of what was going on, but you were also studying it.
Yeah, I'd taken notes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Perfect.
You should see her flip around the house. It's amazing.
Don't piss me off.
I heard that there was actually a scene that they cut out of Attack of the Clones, which was Yoda stretching for about 15 minutes.
Just warming up here. I got to get the kink out.
All right. So the next one. So what I'm learning from Tony's list is that he's clearly a fan of the lightsaber duels.
Yeah.
So his number 2 pick was Kylo and Rey teaming up to fight off the Snoke's Praetorian Guard in The Last Jedi within the throne room. And, I'm torn on that one personally because I made a mistake of kind of watching a breakdown of that particular fight scene.
You should never do that.
Oh, I know. But
just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
I know that he has my wife's full support because she loves that scene as well. And again, it was cool seeing the two of them join up, even though you had to believe that it wasn't going to turn out quite the way that Ray hoped. But it was definitely an incredible fight scene.
Yeah. Although, I mean, it didn't. But the other thing, too, was fearful, like, what other way could this turn out? And, and it was like, oh, I'm glad this is happening, but maybe not how it's happening, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure they all both thought that it was going to turn out a different way than what the end result was when it was all said and done. But it was an exciting fight scene for sure, and I guess mostly because I didn't break it down on video to see where all the flaws were. I just
smart and don't. Again, I can't argue with any of the assessment of the fight, but there's some things that once you see them, you can't unsee them.
Right.
I know.
All right. So, and Tony's number one. Finally, thank you, Tony. All of us have dropped the ball, but you're finally picking it up for us. Empire Strikes Back, the moment where Vader reveals that he is Luke's father. No, I am your father, which I might actually be able to pull off a good Vader today with myself,
Very nice.
No, I am your father.
It's pretty
Perfect.
Good. Pretty good. I like that. Yeah, definitely. I am part of the reason it wasn't on my list because I just assumed somebody else was going to drop it in there. So thank you, Tony, for bringing that in because it definitely deserves to be on the list for sure.
Right.
Yeah, and it does show up in a couple of these lists, and I'm doing them in a specific order. The next list that we're going to move on to was submitted by Amy, who is one of our longtime listeners. I know she's a longtime listener of the Hyperion Adventures podcast and one of your OG Hyperion Adventures. But I was incredibly impressed. Amy, I think I put this out there kind of late afternoon, evening, over the weekend, and she responded within about an hour and a half, I think it was, and it revealed that this had been a dinner discussion for them that evening. So I am honored that our podcast is worthy of family dinner conversation. It was Amy, her husband Tony, and their son Preston, who I know is a huge fan of the clones and all things clone related. So it's going to be interesting to kind of take a look at their list. Now, there were 3 of them. So I'm a little torn on this list because I think there's like 20 things on it.
Only get 15.
So I figured if we did some of these other lists, we could winnow it down to 15 and make sure that they get fully represented. So we will just start down the list. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to kind of I'll hit on everything they've sent in, but the ones that we haven't already talked about, we'll open up for discussion. So the first, and these are in no particular order. The first one was the I am your father scene at the end of Empire Strikes Back, where Vader reveals he's Luke's father. We just discussed that with Tony and his list. So the next pick that they sent in was actually Preston's number 1 pick, and it is when Chancellor Palpatine executes Order 66. So again, heavily clone related. Right. So got to give it to Preston for staying true to his boys, but not their finest moment.
No. Yeah. Although some were able to avoid it.
Yes. Again, another reason to watch the animated series.
Yes.
But yeah, that is, it's a great scene because it is the culmination of this grand plan that the Sith had for years and years, in which Palpatine was bringing to fruition. And he had created that whole situation within the Clone Wars where the Jedi fought side by side with these clones, and they had come to trust them implicitly. So when they were given this order that they could not refuse, it was just something the Jedi were completely unaware for, and they got cut down en masse across any number of planets and systems.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it was one of those things. It's like, no, that can't really be what they're saying. And again with the film, it's like, are they really going to do this? It just
we've talked about the battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin at the end of that film, and that this all just added to the weight of it. This kind of really kicked it off, and it led to what the end result was, which was that lightsaber duel.
Right.
Yep, absolutely. And the next one that they had submitted was, and again, I totally understand why you do this, was the Battle of Hoth, the whole thing.
Yeah, I get it too. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Again, another thing that you had never seen before and were totally not expecting. We had no basis in anything that we'd seen previously for these huge Imperial walkers being deployed across the planet to destroy the shield generator, and the rebels answering with their cobbled together snow speeders.
Right.
So it was just an iconic scene, definitely. And there's no part of it that I think I could watch Star Wars and do without.
Right. Absolutely.
I remember I was lucky enough to have been able to see a sneak peek of Empire Strikes Back a day or two before it actually hit the theaters. And 10-year-old me is out there and telling my schoolmates, in the Sandlot about these walkers and trying to explain it to them. They're like, "What? I don't understand." Like, you won't believe it when you see it. It's incredible, and it truly is to this day. It's amazing.
Now, the next item that they've got on their list is from Rogue One, and it is the hug on the beach between Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor on Scarif. They're both battered and bruised, and know that they're basically have no chance of surviving. And in the background, you can see the blast wave of the Death Star blast impacting there, and it kind of fades out to white as they get consumed by that blast.
Right.
So again, it was another thing that you're not used to seeing in films, right? You've got this group of people that they do a great job of making you feel attachment to or feel like you're invested in, and not a single one of them ends up surviving that particular film.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and, in such a short time, their relationship changed so dramatically in how they felt towards each other and responded to each other and appreciated each other, that you felt like, oh, this is on a good track. And like you said, in a lot of films, things tend to get wrapped up and people are happily ever after kind of thing. Yeah. And that's not what we're faced with.
In a lot of films, they're riding off into the sunset. The sunset's not running off into them.
Yeah. And maybe we've seen too many Pixar films where everything, like you can have catastrophe after catastrophe and things will turn out.
It'll work out in the long run.
But not here.
It did work out, though.
It did work
Just
out.
not for them.
Right.
Just, yeah. Not the best day ever for them.
No.
And I will say, actually, this is the perfect spot for a shameless plug for your guys and your podcast. At some point later this month, we are going to be doing an episode on Hyperion Adventures where we review Rogue One.
Yeah.
And it's part of their Star Wars Remembered series. So if you have not listened to that, go over there and check it out. You can find them on pretty much any podcast network. I'll have them give their contact information at the end of the show. But definitely worth checking those out. They're kind enough to let me guest on those. And we've had a lot of fun kind of breaking down the movies in the order that they fit chronologically within the Star Wars universe as we kind of build up to the Rise of Skywalker. So we're having a lot of fun with that. Check it out. Make sure you give them a review. And please don't tell them to not invite me back.
Oh, no, we love it. We're honored when you show up and you bring so much to the show there that we are very indebted and appreciative.
Definitely. We did Solo, a Star Wars story a couple weeks ago, and just in a couple more weeks, or just like you said, Rob, we're going to do Rogue One. And yes, we're excited to have you on for each and every episode.
Absolutely. But particularly this one.
I may just let you guys talk, and I'll just kind of sit back and relax.
Right.
I know you too. I mean, I love Rogue One too, but I know you guys love Rogue One.
3-hour episode.
Exactly.
All right. So the next pick on Amy and family's list is the Kessel Run. So both talking about it in the early films and then actually getting to see it kind of play out in Solo. Right. She is in shock that we did not talk more about this on the Solo review for Hyperion. But she is bound and determined to make sure that we make up for that by having this as part of her list.
Excellent.
That's a good point.
Yep.
We did talk about the rounding down, though. I think we did.
Yeah.
Of course, the new Common Core math.
Right. Yes.
That apparently that's where they got the idea for it, was Star Wars.
Right.
The next submission from Amy and Tony and Preston is the moment when Anakin takes his first breath as Darth Vader. And I think that certainly for a lot of us, that is one of the best parts of that particular film.
Right.
And then he crushes the medical droids.
No.
Again.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting that scene was in the trailers, even.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, it's kind of like, wow, you're doing that reveal, but
I mean, the one thing about that also is that the split second before that, it's the look in Anakin's face as he sees the mask coming down on him, and you can almost see it in his eyes. He's like, this is what my life is going to be now.
Right.
He just has this mournful look of, oh, I can't believe it's come to this,
Yeah.
And fear. And I mean, it's basically, it is, it's like they're giving him a juice box full of Sith juice because, you've got the fear, you've got the rage, you've got the hate, and it's all bottled up in that black armor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they did give a couple of items that were already discussed: the trench run, the message to Obi-Wan. Amy had submitted one that was not the battle with Rey and Kylo, but actually when the two of them are using the Force to try to take the Skywalker lightsaber for their own, and they end up ripping it in half.
Right.
Which was actually a very cool scene, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing if they address the repair of that lightsaber at all within The Rise of Skywalker. I don't know if it's already repaired when that starts. Or,
Move on.
I think that's Gorilla Tape that they use.
Nice.
But I can't be sure.
Stuff works on everything.
That's right. Now, one of the things that was kind of cool about Amy's list is that they had included a couple of items that were kind of outside the films themselves and came from the animated series. The first one being Ahsoka and Ezra, who is one of the characters within Star Wars Rebels, and the world between worlds sequence as Palpatine is basically trying to come through one of the doorways they've opened, and they're having to battle back against that. And the other great moment from Rebels was Kanan Jarrus and his sacrificial Force push as he's holding back an explosion with the Force, and then he ends up turning his attention on the Ghost, and Force pushes them away to save them from death. So definitely just the epitome of Jedi and self-sacrifice there.
Yeah, that was a huge moment and not an expected moment by any stretch of the imagination when you first saw it. It really kind of caught you off guard.
Yeah.
You were not expecting, especially at that point in the series, for it to end in that way.
Right, exactly.
Yep. And then I do have one more list, and this was submitted by Jacob, who is actually one of my coworkers and has been listening to the podcast, and I much appreciate that. So it's always nice to have someone that sits 20 feet away from me that I can go to if I'm looking for some input for an episode. And of his 5 items, 3 have already been mentioned, but the couple that I did want to throw out there, one was the scene between Han and Greedo within the cantina in A New Hope, which he identified as who shot first. Now, I think that everyone on this podcast would say Han shot first, especially after the events of Solo.
Yeah.
He clearly has learned his lesson about not letting people get the drop on him. And obviously within canon now, with the rework that they've done on A New Hope, they seem to have pretty clearly defined that Han shot first. So, but still, that is a great moment. And right away, you've just met Han Solo, and already you're kind of getting a feel for the fact that he is this, you haven't seen the soft, fuzzy side of Han yet.
Right.
The scruffy looking nerf herder side, but
who's scruffy looking?
Exactly. You've already seen that he is he's not going to let anyone get the upper hand on him, and he's going to protect himself in whatever way that he deems is necessary.
Right.
And the other item that he brought up that I thought was great was the trash compactor scene again in A New Hope. Amy had sent that in as her husband Tony's kind of PS pick, but Jacob had already given it, so I want to give credit where credit is due. And that is just another great scene. There's so many times in A New Hope where you're like, are they going to make it out of this alive?
Right.
And it's never a good thing if you have to worry or rely on the professor to get you out of that, get you out of that jam. So there were so many different moving parts that you just weren't sure how that was going to play out.
Right.
And of course, the Dianoga, I thought they only lived in drinking fountains, but apparently they also live in trash compactors. So.
And just a note, when you eventually get to go to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, there's a number that's on all the trash cans out there that may just play a part in the trash compactor scene.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. But Jay, you're right. Oh, go ahead.
No.
I was
just going to say, always good to know.
Yeah.
That there's additional detail within Star Wars Galaxy's Edge that has some meaning.
Exactly. But yeah, you're right. That scene itself had so many different layers and so many different things that were going on that even if you were trying to make a list, you could list several of those things within that scene that were iconic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, I mean, there are so many more that we have not had time to bring up today. If you do want to submit a list to us, I can still read some of that information on the next show. And it is a lot of fun to kind of go through and see, after all the films that have come out, all the animated series, to just kind of think about it and see what things jump to the forefront of your mind. And as we saw with these lists, it's not always the things that you would think it would be. It's very diverse. It's very personal, as I mentioned earlier, and it's kind of a fun exercise. I almost had wished, as I started doing it this afternoon, kind of finalizing my list, that I had narrowed it down a little bit more, but I think doing that would have caused us to have a lot more duplication.
Right.
So it worked out really well the way that we did it.
Yeah, no, great list. I also want to put out there, I know you brought his list on earlier, Tony from the Disney Discussions podcast. He and his sons, Sparrow and Stitch, right now are doing a 3-part series where they're kind of going through what Star Wars means to them. And they've invited a lot of different podcasters on, including Michelle and myself, and kind of going through. And I know their episode just got released today on Monday. So if you're looking for some more Star Wars content, definitely go check out Disney Discussions podcast as well.
Absolutely. Why don't you guys go ahead and give the contact information for where people can find you and how they can reach out with you?
Oh, sure. Of course. We are the Hyperion Adventures podcast. And yes, we talk a lot about Star Wars, but we also talk about Disney. We talk about Marvel. We talk about the parks. We give vacation tips, all sorts of stuff to kind of get you ready for when you're going on vacation or when you're going to the movies or whatever. And you can find us pretty much everywhere you get podcasts. Best place to find us is our website, HyperionAdventurespodcast.com. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartMedia. And you can find us socially on Twitter at Hyperion Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Hyperion Adventures Podcast.
Awesome. And there's really not a lot of information this week as far as news goes. We're still kind of in a holding pattern for annual pass holder previews for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge down at the Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. So again, I think
that's
put that
coming soon, by the way. There was a little bit of a leak of some possibilities out there. I think I'd be keeping your eye on your email in the next few days. I think it's coming soon.
Yeah, I've got notifications set up. I get text and email as soon as anything hits. So I will be watching out for that. And again, I will post that on our social media. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that we did start a coffee site for the podcast. And I will give you that information if you want to make a donation to help support the show. So that actually can be found at ko-fi.com/JTA podcast. So again, if you enjoy the show and you want to reach out and support us for the price of basically a cup of coffee, which is what that site's all about, feel free to do that. We'd very much appreciate it. And we're going to keep doing this whether we get $1 or not. Just
for the children.
Yep, it's for the children. But, basically what I'd like to do is I'd like to see if I can get some funds to enhance some of our technical apparatus on my end so that it makes it a little bit easier to do some of these episodes where we've got guests on, and anything that we can do to help move in that direction is going to be a giant help for the show, and it's actually going to improve the quality of the episodes. So Again, if you would like to reach out and give us ideas for possible topics for future shows, anytime we're doing these top 5 episodes, which we will be doing more of in the future, you can always reach us at jtapodcast@gmail.com. And we can be found on social media via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at JTA Podcast. Tom and Michelle, thank you guys so much for coming on this week. And a very special thank you to all of our listeners who took the time out of their day to send in their lists. We had a great time going through all that. And we will look forward to talking with you guys all next week. So tune in next week. I think we're going to have a conversation, and I'll put some stuff up on social media regarding what that next week's episode is going to be about, give you a little bit of an idea where we're headed, and we look forward to talking with you then. So thank you, and may the Force be with you.